Missouri home, and she paused to stare across the landscape of scrub oak and butternut. Once they'd lived in the country, but now the former capital of Missouri spread out along the river, and Tabby's home edged both city and country. A fox tripped across the yard. Still, Tabby scratched away, stopping only when she needed to add water to the powder to make more ink. She'd have to replace the pen soon, too, but she had a good supply of those. Horace, her firstborn, saw to that, making her several dozen before he left for Oregon, almost 2 years ago now. He was a good son. She prayed for his welfare and wondered anew at Lavina's stamina, managing all their children while they waited. Well, so was Manthano a good son, though he'd let himself be whisked away by that woman he fell in love with and rarely came to visit. Still, he was a week's ride away. Children. She shook her head in wistfulness. Fern, on the other hand, lived just down a path. And it was Fern, her one and only daughter, who also urged her to write her autobiography. Your personal story, Mama. How you and Papa met, where you lived, even the wisdom you garnered. Wisdom. She relied on memory to tell her story, and memory proved a fickle thing. She supposed her daughter wanted her to write so she wouldn't get into her daughter's business. That happened with older folks sometimes when they lacked passions of their own. She wanted her daughter to know how much being with her and the children filled her days. Maybe not to let her know that, despite her daughter's stalwart efforts, she was lonely at times, muttering around in her cabin by herself, talking to Beatrice, her pet chicken, who followed her like a shadow. She was committed to not being a burden on her children. Oh, she helped a bit by teaching her grandchildren, but one couldn't teach children all day long. Of course, lessons commenced daily long, but the actual sitting on chairs, pens and ink in hand, minds and books open, that was education at its finest, but couldn't fill the day. The structure, the weaving of teacher and student, so both discovered new things, that was the passion of her life, wasn't it? Still, she was intrigued by the idea of recalling and writing down ordinary events that had helped define her. Could memory bring back the scent of dear Clark's hair tonic, or the feel of the tweed vest he wore, or the sight of his blue eyes that sparkled when he teased and preached? She'd last seen those eyes in life 28 years ago. She had thought she couldn't go on a day without him, but she'd done it nearly 30 years. What had first attracted her to the man? And how did she end up from a life in Stonington, Connecticut, begun in 1780, to a widow in Maryland, looking after her children and her own mother, and then on to Missouri in 1824, and still there in winter 1845? Was this where she'd die? A life that is worth writing at all is worth writing minutely and truthfully. Longfellow. She penned it in her memoir. This was a truth, but perhaps a little embellishment now and then wouldn't hurt either. A story should be interesting, after all. His beard reached lower than his throat. Horace, Tabby's oldest son, came to her cabin first. At least she assumed he had, as none of his children nor Fern's had rushed through the trees to tell her that he'd already been to Lavina's or Virgil and Fern's place. It was mid-morning, and her bleeding hearts drooped in the August heat. "I'm alive, Mother." He removed his hat, and for a moment Tabby saw her deceased husband's face pressed onto this younger version, the same height, nearly 6 feet tall, and the same dark hair, tender eyes. "So you are, praise God." She searched his brown eyes for the sparkle she remembered, reached to touch his cheek, saw above his scruffy beard a red-raised scar. "And the worse for wear, I'd say. I'll tell of all that later. I'm glad to see you among the living as well."